Hi, we're just saying hello, but we've got people logging in right now, so we're going to wait about another minute and then we'll get started. So sit tight and we will go. Something's not, oh, there we go. I don't know if that inadvertently. Okay. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. I am, or good morning, depending on where in the country you are. I am Andrew Seligson, president of Campus Compact, and thank you for joining us for this conversation workshop about organizing for change in higher education. And I just want to say a couple quick things before introducing our fearless leader for this session and getting us started. So the first is just a quick reminder about why we're doing this, which is at our national institutes focused on campus civic action planning. We heard from a lot of folks that there was a real interest in understanding how people could become active agents leading change in their campus communities and the broader community campus ecosystems in which those institutions are embedded. That there was a recognition that the planning task is not just kind of sitting and envisioning the future, but about bringing people together to speak, think, and ultimately act together to make change, and that essentially is organizing. So that's how we came to think this would be a useful session. We saw a lot of interest, people have registered, et cetera, so we think that's a good call. The second thing I wanted to say is just a tiny bit about the fact that we're doing this today. So the way I think about what happened over the last 24 hours is that it made the work that we have all agreed to do together a lot more important. That is to say that I don't think we can live in a world where we imagine that the work of preparing students for lives of engaged citizenship is peripheral to what colleges and universities do. I don't think we can anymore live in a world where we think that collectively thinking about how we ensure that our most vulnerable citizens are safe and protected and have opportunity and voice. We can't think of that as peripheral to the work of any important social institution anymore. And we know that colleges and universities in context of threat are important bearers of the values of dignity and equality and equity and justice. And so we need to ensure that our institutions are doing that work maximally. And I think, our civic action planning work turned out to be timed very well in terms of the actual needs of the world in which we're situated. So I hope that we can approach this work with that focus. And in that particular context, I used to teach a course on art and politics in which one of the things we did was a section on labor songs. So I have an album that probably many of you have seen, and if not, the title of it. And it's a line that Joe Hill sort of mythically was alleged to be his last words. Joe Hill, the great labor songwriter and activist, but was actually in a letter he wrote to Big Bill Haywood. But the line is, "Don't mourn, organize." So that's what we're doing. So we are going to jump into the work of thinking about how to organize well and how to make change in the worlds that we occupy. And so to help us in that work, I am pleased to introduce John Reiff. John has recently retired as Director for Civic Engagement and Service Learning at UMass. He also has played a role in helping the state of Massachusetts to facilitate a new vision for civic learning for students in public colleges and universities throughout the state. John is experienced as a teacher, as a scholar, as a leader and an activist. And we thought he was the perfect person to kind of lead us through some thinking collectively about organizing for change, and specifically in the context of building institution civic capacity to facilitate developing our students and our communities in the ways we need. So I am going to turn through this very fancy technology we have, which is called pivoting the laptop. I'm going to turn this over to John and get out of the way.
Okay, thank you, Andrew, and thank you all for joining us on this very interesting day, following yesterday, which was also a very interesting day. I have a bunch of things prepared to share with you and then engage you in conversation about this stuff I'm going to lay out. But before I do that, I need to speak a little about the election that has just passed. I need to address that. And there are four things I want to say about it. The first is, no matter what outcome might have happened yesterday, the election was not going to solve all the problems of American democracy or American society. So this election certainly did not solve those problems, but other outcomes we might have been looking for also would not have solved all those problems. That's something we all know, but I want to remind us of that. I want to share a story about Miles Horton, who was the founder of Highlander Center, which located in eastern Tennessee, was one of the cradles of the civil rights movement. And Miles wrote an autobiography, which he entitled The Long Haul. And he chose that title because he said, if you care about democracy and you care about justice, you have to commit yourself to the long haul, to work over your lifetime, because democracy and justice will need us to work for that long. So let's adopt that frame for the work that we're doing. It is the long haul that we need to be part of. About 20 years ago, I had the opportunity to hear a story from Nadine Cruz, who many of you know. Nadine told me about being a college student in the Philippines, which is her native country, and getting involved in the revolutionary movement to overthrow the dictator, Marcos. And during that time, she learned from other people in the movement this saying, that sometimes conditions are such that your movement for change can build lots of momentum, get lots of people to join to make much happen and move forward. And sometimes conditions are such that the best you can hope for is to find a cave in the hills to hide out in and keep the spark alive until conditions change and you can come down from the hills and begin mobilizing and organizing and draw lots of people into this movement for change. So hearing that story from her 20 years ago has served as an anchor point for me as I've gone through a series of ups and downs in my own work for civic engagement, for democracy and justice. And the third story I want to tell is a story about John Dewey, who exactly 100 years ago wrote a little article called The Need of an Industrial Education in an Industrial Democracy. The US was, at that time, an industrial society. And so he was picking up that frame. And he says, of course, education in an industrial democracy needs to prepare people to hold jobs, to be successful in the workplace, to support themselves, and to contribute to an economy that supports us all. That's all in his first paragraph. And he says, there are other people who talk about this more. I'll let them talk about it. What I want to talk about in the rest of this essay is what democracy needs from its participants, from its citizens. And he says, what democracy needs is for people to hold the conviction that it matters if they collaborate with other people to work together toward a public good. That set of dispositions that enables people to see other people as co-participants in creating a common good is something, he says, that unfortunately does not grow on bushes. It has to be cultivated. And he says education must be reborn in every generation. And I got that wrong. Democracy must be reborn in every generation. And education is its midwife. Talking to this little green dot that's my camera. I forgot what I was saying. Hope I don't do that again, but if I do, someone here will correct me. Okay, so those are the thoughts I've had this morning as I've thought about what's the meaning of this election. Meaning is we're faced with a new set of challenges, but we're also faced with the same challenges we were faced with before the election. And education is one of the most important fields, one of the most important arenas in which we can work to address those challenges. And I suspect that's what all of you are involved in. So I'm speaking to the choir. Perhaps I'm preaching to the choir. So let's talk about how we can go about organizing for change. And I'm going to ask my colleague here to bring up a PowerPoint so that you can see stuff that I've prepared for us to look at and think about together. Here it comes. It's very dark. Here it is. Okay. So the name of this presentation is Organizing for Change in Higher Education. And I want to begin by asking, why are we here today in this webinar when there's so many other places we might be? And I want to answer that in 3 ways. So first, I want to say a little about why am I here? Andrew gave a brief introduction to me. I'm going to add a little to that. It was over 35 years ago that 2 students asked me to sponsor them in what they called field studies, and that introduced me to the practice of service learning. And I quickly adopted what I understood as service learning as a way to promote civic engagement, as a way to promote building the capacity of students to work in ways that would really create positive change in the society. That became my focus as a teacher. It then, 20 years ago, became my focus as an administrator, directing over that last 20 years 2 different offices for service learning and civic engagement at 2 very different kinds of institutions. And about 10 or 12 years ago, at UMass Amherst, where I was director of service learning, we had a 4-semester program we called the Citizen Scholars Program. And we had a grad student who came and worked with us as a TA. And she had previously been at Harvard, where she had worked with a guy named Marshall Gans, who has been community organizer, a civil rights organizer, a United Farm Workers organizer, a political organizer, and then a teacher of organizing. And she said, "You need Marshall's course." And so she brought his course on organizing to us. And she taught it several times. And then I thought I might need to pick it up, so I thought I should sit in on it before I had to pick it up, and I should learn what she was doing in that course. And she said, "We need to have our own organizing projects if we're thinking about what the course is really designed to do." And so I said, "Okay, I've got one." And she said, "What is it?" And I said, "I'm organizing the faculty and the administrators of my campus to embrace and support civic engagement and service learning." And so we went from there. I ended up never teaching that course, but thinking about that goal for a semester in the framework of the course led me to adopt the lens of an organizer and to see that as that's really what I'm doing. Yes, I've been a teacher. Yes, I'm an administrator, and I'm, managing an office and managing budgets and all of the supervising staff. But what I'm really trying to do is organize the people of this campus to embrace and support civic engagement and service learning. And so it's from that lens that I've developed all the rest of the stuff that I'll be presenting to you today and then talking with you about. And so that's my story of self, very briefly. So now, why are you here? It's my guess that many of you are on campuses where your campus leader, your president, or your chancellor has signed on to Campus Compact's invitation to create a civic action plan. And that you have been asked or have volunteered yourself to have a role in creating that plan. And you are doing that, I'm guessing, because you see it as consistent with your values and your vision for your campus, for your students, for your faculty and staff, for your communities. And so I'm guessing that's why you're here. And that's a little bit of the story of us, because you and I are in this set of goals together. And so what's our opportunity right now? We have the massive intellectual resources of Campus Compact behind us, offering us a framework and a whole set of tools to use to create these civic action plans. We have some 400 and some odd, or perhaps it's more than that now, presidents and chancellors who have agreed. Is it more?
About 450.
About 450, Andrew tells me. Chancellors and presidents who have agreed to create campus civic action plans on their own campuses. And so this is happening all over the country, and we have the opportunity to be a part of it. And as Andrew and I have both already mentioned, we're doing this in the framework of an election that shifts a lot of things and does not shift a lot of things. And so we have the opportunity to think about how our work can shift things in a direction that we feel it needs to go for equality and for justice. And that's a little bit of the story of right now. And what I've just done is I've walked through one of the things that Marshall Gans taught me, which is that organizers try to connect to the people they're talking to through telling, through public narrative, through telling stories. And those stories should include something about themselves, something about all of us together, and something about the opportunities and the challenges that we face right now. So that's where I've started. So, if you're here for those reasons, you have a purpose statement. So my question is, what is your purpose statement? And I want to suggest to you that you might put it in the form that Marshall taught me, which looks like this. I am organizing whom to do what. And so if you're trying on the lens of an organizer and you're going to be looking at your work through that lens, you're going to be working with people. Who are they? And you're going to be working with them to do what? So I have a suggestion for the purpose statement you might adopt. It might look like this. I am organizing the senior administrators, the faculty, the staff, the students, and the community partners of my institution to create and embrace a great campus civic action plan. If you're maybe a state campus compact person, then maybe your purpose statement is, I am supporting the faculty and staff in my member campuses to organize the senior administrators, faculty, staff, students, and community partners of their institutions to create and embrace a great campus civic action plan. You may want to write this in a different way, but I think this might be useful to you to adopt something like that as your purpose statement, because it names who you're focusing on and what it is you're trying to do. And then there's a third element, which I'll be developing through the rest of this presentation, because a full purpose statement also answers the question, how? I'm organizing whom to do what? How? So, if that's your purpose statement, then what is this great campus civic action plan? I'm assuming that everybody on this webinar has spent some time thinking about the elements of a great campus civic action plan. And I'm going to run very quickly through those 5 major commitments just to bring them to the front of our minds. So one of those 5 commitments is we empower our students, our faculty, our staff, and our community partners to co-create mutually respectful partnerships in pursuit of a just, equitable, and sustainable future for communities beyond the campus, nearby, and around the world. And we prepare our students for lives of engaged citizenship with the motivation and capacity to deliberate, act, and lead in pursuit of the public good. And we embrace our responsibilities as place-based institutions, contributing to the health and strength of our communities, economically, socially, environmentally, educationally, and politically. And we harness the capacity of our institutions through research, teaching, partnerships, and institutional practice to challenge the prevailing social and economic inequalities that threaten our democratic future. And finally, we foster an environment that consistently affirms the centrality of the public purposes of higher education by setting high expectations for members of the campus community to contribute to their achievement. So that's, if we've signed on to create a civic action plan for our campus, that's what we're working toward. And so the question is, how? What do we need to know to organize the people of our campus? Let's start with one of the statements that Alexis de Tocqueville made almost 200 years ago. De Tocqueville said, when he looked at the US and tried to figure out what was happening in this new democracy, he said, in democratic countries, knowledge of how to combine is the mother of all other forms of knowledge. Knowledge of how to combine. On its progress depends that of all the others. So, what are some of the key elements in the knowledge of how to combine? This is the framework that I've taken from Marshall Gans, and I'm going to share 5 key elements from his framework: relationships, motivation, strategy, campaigns, and leadership. And with each of these, I'll ask you to think about, how do these apply to your work on your campus? And I'll try to help you have some of those thoughts. So let's start with relationships. Marshall says, and I'm drawing quotes from Marshall, or I'm rephrasing them in my own way. He says that organizers develop new relationships out of old ones, sometimes by linking one person to another, and sometimes by linking whole networks of people together. So if you're using the lens of an organizer, you need to be asking, who are the people that I need to be developing new relationships with? Perhaps people who already have relationships, but we're going to create them in new ways. Relationships grow out of exchanges of interests and resources, and you have to figure out what those are. What are the interests of the different people who need to be involved? And what are the resources that they could bring if they care to bring those resources, if they get drawn in and committed to bring those resources? Relationships also grow out of the commitment to sustain them. And that doesn't just happen. It also does not grow on bushes. You have to ask for it. And so when you're talking with people about what we could do together, one of the things to think about is to ask. If we have ideas, those of us who are academics are really good about brainstorming about stuff and coming up with all kinds of wonderful ideas about what could be. And if we're academic organizers, we have to take those brainstorms and push them down to commitments to act. And what is it that I will commit to, and what is it that you, person who I'm talking to, will commit to do to make first steps toward these wonderful ideas we've brainstormed? And if we're doing that brainstorming, we're in the process of creating a shared story that we have to make together. And if we've made a shared story, then we can tell it to other people and invite them to join it and to share it and to co-create it even further. One of the key tools here is something called one-to-ones. One-to-one meetings, one-to-one conversations. That's a key tool for an organizer. So if you're taking on the lens of an organizer, you need to think about, who do I need to set up meetings with, and what is it I'm going to find out from them when I have this meeting? What are their interests that are relevant to this work that led me to them? And what are the resources that I might ask them to share? And how might my interests and my resources help them with what they already want to do? And do I already know what they already want to do, or do I need to hear that from them? And so there's a whole process of conversation which is dialogical and which is aimed at discovering common ground that you can work together from. So let me give you an example. Suppose you're part of a committee to build a campus civic action plan, and your committee decides that, well, one way to meet this goal of preparing students for lives of engaged citizenship, that's goal number 2, is to create a civic engagement course requirement. So your committee needs to ask, who controls access to this resource of curriculum requirements? Who are the gatekeepers? Is it a committee of the Faculty Senate? Well, who's on that committee? Who is listened to? Who is most respected on that committee? Could you arrange to talk with key people from that committee to get a sense of what are their interests and how their interests, whatever they are, might be met through your initiative. And in that conversation, then you need to be open to how might your initiative be shaped to meet their interests. So that it's not about just convincing them to do what you want them to do, but exploring with them to discover what might we create that would be good from their point of view as well as from yours. And then, if you have that conversation, what's the story that can come out of that conversation that you could share with other people to help build this initiative? And part of the story is, I've talked with person X, person Y, and person Z, and here's what they've had to say about how this particular initiative could address these concerns, these elements of our campus strategic plan, these goals in our general education requirements, these whatever it is that their interests are. Okay, so that's a little bit about relationships. We'll come back to that a lot, and we'll play with that for the rest of this webinar, and you'll play with it beyond. Second element that I learned from Marshall is to think about motivation. And organizers work to deepen people's understanding of who they are, what they want, and why they want it, which is their values. Organizers engage people in articulating a call to action as a shared story of the challenges they must face, the choices they must make, and the hope that can inspire the courage to make these choices now. Hope to inspire courage is what we always need. Some of us may need that especially today. But hope to inspire courage. And that leads us to a story of self, a story of us, and a story of now, which is one of the key motivating tools. We construct it together. I've given you my version of it. If we were talking face-to-face instead of through this electronic medium, I would be asking you to help me construct a better version of that story. And you would be giving me your story of self and how it connects to me. And together we would make the story of us and the story of now. And I hope that we have some chances to do that. So, third element is strategy. Marshall talks about strategy in this way, that organizers engage people in deliberating about how they can turn what they have, that's our resources, into what they need. And what we need is power to get what we want, which are our interests. And that whole thing, deliberating about how to turn resources into power to get your interests, is your strategy. So you build the strategy together, and it has a set of steps in it to take you from where you are and what you have to the power to get you what you want. Power is the influence our resources can have on the interests of others who hold resources that can influence our interests. You see reciprocity. You see it going back and forth here. So organizing often requires using our resources to mobilize power interdependently with others. Power is a critical concept in organizing, and sometimes we get taught to think of power as a dirty word because we think of power in terms of hierarchical power that some people hold over other people and exercise that power to make them do whatever it is the people at the top want. And that's certainly one form of power. But there's, in addition to power over, I learned years ago from the feminist movement the notion of three forms of power, that there's power over, there's also power with others, and there's power from within. And so I think we're especially interested in tapping into power with others and power from within each of us. to move toward our goals. So if you've gotten this far, you move into action. And organizers do their action through campaigns. Campaigns are highly energized, intensely focused, concentrated streams of activity with specific goals and deadlines. People are recruited, programs are launched, battles fought. Battles? On your campus, a battle? And organizations built through campaigns. Marshall has a little visual. He has a lot of them, actually, but there's one I'm going to bring you here for a campaign. And you'll notice down in the left corner, there's a foundation. There's work that you do to really lay the groundwork, lay the foundation for the campaign, to bring some people together to think about where we want to go and what we want to do to build the strategy, to identify the interests and the resources, to identify other people. And then you have some event that's a kickoff. And those things may have already happened on your campus. I'll be asking about that in a little bit. From the kickoff event, then you build towards something that will be one of the peaks. And it's a goal that you try to accomplish. And you set that first goal pretty low so that the people who are working together with you can make it happen and be pleased that they accomplished something together. And that then serves as further motivation to work toward the next peak, which is maybe a little higher and a little harder to get to. And the next one, which is even higher and harder. But because you've had some success, you move up toward those things. And after each accomplishment, there's some fall off that naturally happens because people have concentrated their energy on accomplishing this thing. And hopefully it did get accomplished. Sometimes it doesn't. And then you have to regroup and plan, well, what's an alternate way to move forward? And if the campaign is successful, eventually you reach your largest goal, and that's the peak. And when you reach that peak, then again, a lot of energy goes into it. And then people say, okay, well, that's done. The peak for your campaign could be the creation of your campus action plan. And it's all done. It's written up. And not only is it written up, but you've included a whole bunch of key stakeholders in thinking through what it should be. And you've got a whole bunch of people embracing this plan and embracing their parts of the plan especially, so that as you move down from the peak and into the resolution of the creation of the plan, you start the next campaign, which is the campaign to actually carry out that plan. And you've already laid the foundation for that plan, which was what you did to get to your peak. So this whole campaign becomes the foundation for the next campaign. Down at the bottom of the screen, there's, I hope you can see this, there's a little circle and an arrow, two arrows. One goes in a circle and the other does not. These are two notions about time. Organizations often move through cyclical time. Colleges and universities certainly do that. We start every fall. We run through the academic year. If you break it down further, we run through the first semester and then we run through the second semester. And we get to the end and then we start over again. And so if we are located in and do our work in these kinds of places, we have learned to think in cyclical time, because that's one of the main forms of time in our organization. A campaign uses a different form of time. There's an arrow of time that starts somewhere and moves to somewhere else. And so as we're acknowledging the way our colleagues on our campus think in organizational cycles, we also need to be thinking about time that is going to carry us from one place to another. Okay, there's one more concept I want to talk about a little bit, and then we're going to start applying this together. So, this concept is leadership. Organizers, are organizers the leader of the organizing activity? Let's think about that. Marshall says, well, organizers identify, recruit, and develop leadership. Then they build community around leadership. And if there's community, they can build power out of community. So, question I'd like you to think about now is, where is the leadership for your civic action plan? And I'm going to ask my colleague to take us out of this PowerPoint and take you back to me. All right, am I on? Okay, so you're all seeing me. So I have two models for leadership, and one of them,
are these so Wednesday and Thursday?
But I'm on. Okay, good. One of those models looks like this. So if you follow this model, you should see the leadership for your civic action plan as the person who is right here in the middle of this little gizmo. And there are points of connection coming out to all these people who are gathered around the leader, taking advice, taking direction, receiving support, receiving guidance in doing the work of rolling this ball along forward and getting somewhere. Okay, that's one way to think about leadership. There's another way that I'd invite you to consider, and that's to think about leadership as looking more like this. So that if you're the organizer who's developing leadership, as Marshall suggested we need to do, then you are building the capacity of people to hold distributed leadership, to hold their own part of leadership in this initiative that they all share. And the structure is held together by all these different people stepping up to leadership, whether it's been designated or whether they just see an opportunity to initiate something and make something happen. At UMass Amherst about 14 years ago, we had an initiative called Community, Diversity, and Social Justice. We were working on this initiative as something that was both top-down, because our chancellor committed to it, and bottom-up, because we organized committees in every unit that were comprised of staff at all levels, from clerical to deans and department heads. And we were talking about how well do we do support for diversity? How well do we build community? And how well do we enact social justice in our own place? And as you drive onto the UMass campus, you see a big sign that says, University of Massachusetts, welcome, or something like that. And one day I drove onto campus and I saw that the sign not only said that, but it also said community, diversity, and social justice. Why did it say that? Because the person who was in charge of the signs was part of this initiative. And he thought, well, if we care about this as an institution, we should say it to people, and I'm in charge of the signs, so I'll put it on the signs. And so he did. Having that kind of sense of initiative that everyone can exercise leadership and connect it to everyone else is what you want. Okay, let's go back to the PowerPoint for just a little bit more. Alrighty, it's a dark time. But now it's not so dark. So, where's the leadership? You're going to need to think about that. So let me take a couple of examples and ask you to help me think through these examples. And then I have arranged to do an interview with one of you to kind of play out a process of applying this lens to a specific institution that she's part of. And then we'll have some time for questions and discussion and responses from me to those questions. So let's look at this example. Let's say that your committee decides one of your goals is for your institution to embrace its responsibilities as a place-based institution contributing to the health and strength of its communities. And your committee decides that one way to do this is by committing to purchase more of the food your campus serves, to purchase it from local farmers. Who are the stakeholders in this specific issue? And how might those stakeholders be mobilized to support this commitment? And what changes would making this commitment require in your campus and community systems? And who would have to decide to make those changes? So, perhaps some of your campuses have already made this kind of commitment, or perhaps some of your campuses are on the verge of maybe making this commitment, and you're thinking about how you might help drive the campus into this kind of commitment. So I want to invite you to share the answers that you see to some of these questions. And what we're going to do is activate our chat system. And because there are quite a few of you who I hope are still on this call, about 25 of you. And I have unmuted the chat box. And so you can indicate that you would like to answer my questions. Who has to be involved? What would it take to commit them? And what kinds of changes would have to get made? Is there anyone who would like to share a bit of the story of that organizing initiative seen on your campus or that you're considering? And if you would just, how do we do this, Kirsten?
Why don't we, for the sake of efficiency, why don't we go ahead and if you're willing to share your answer to that question, go ahead and type an exclamation point into the chat box, and then we'll go ahead and call on everyone in an orderly way. So we'd love to hear from you on that.
Okay.
Absolutely.
We're gonna wait for everybody to jump on it, and they're excited to participate in the information.
Okay.
I don't know if there's documented rules from her.
Now I only see some of it. Looks like here's one. Or not. Okay, we're going to scroll through our chat box.
I mean, we have this option
People are
to use
taking
the
the top right now.
delivery.
Oh, so if you type it, I'll get to see it. Okay.
It was their fault for putting the wrong
And
address.
Elaine
And so
has asked us to mute ourselves if we aren't talking.
our versus theirs.
Okay, that's a good
And I think
request.
Christy called Dave Millay or Sandra Bell and
Okay.
get it done.
Is this something that anybody has worked on any of your campuses?
It's a
I would be surprised if this is a brand new idea for all of you. I'm not going to assume that yet, but I'm going to assume that in a minute if I don't hear from someone. Okay, Kim Silcox, you're speaking to another question, which I would love to come back to. So we will come back to you in just a couple of minutes. But first, I would like to try to explore this example I put up, which is one of the goals of the Civic Action Plan is to serve as an anchor institution to support the strength and well-being of your community. And one idea about how to do that, there are many ideas in many different ways. So I picked one that I thought might be one you would share, which is think about the money that your institution spends in the local community or spends not in the local community, and to think about how might you direct more of that money to the local community so that you would be contributing directly to the economic well-being of the people who are your neighbors. And specifically in this case, the people who are farmers who are your neighbors, and you'd be then contributing to the local farm economy, which if all of us did that, we'd have more local farms, and
purchasing
we would probably be healthier. So, is anybody doing that?
Said that we may not be able to use it to purchase food because they not authorize vendors for food.
Okay, I'm not seeing response.
Not using state funds to purchase the food. It's
okay, Michael Italia.
Purchasing card for it.
So,
Abel does this.
Michael, could you talk to us and walk us through this a little bit? I may have said your name wrong, so you can say how you actually say your name. You should be unmuted.
All right. Can you hear me? I'm not sure if the mic on my laptop works.
Okay.
Did they say we can't do it, or we might not be able to do it?
We might not be able to do it.
And who's going to determine that?
Okay, I'm hearing someone talking.
And then, well, when I met with Rebecca Key, it was, she called the folks that.
Okay.
Michael does not have a laptop mic,
no.
so he can't talk to us.
Okay, so Michael, you can all see what Michael has typed into the chat thing. Thanks for jumping in, Michael. You'd need to include food service and dining, or dining, however you name that. And that's going to be different at different campuses, because some campuses do their own food service, and some campuses contract with some national provider of food services. And if your campus controls its own dining commons, then you can work that out within the campus. But if your campus contracts out to someone else, they're going to have their procedures for getting food, and it may involve purchasing food that gets shipped to them from far, far away. But those contracts come up for renewal every few years. And someone makes the decision about whether to renew the current provider or whether to make changes in the conditions of the next contract. And so figuring out what you would need to do is some power mapping. Who has control over the decisions about what food is going to be purchased and presented on your campus? You'd also need to have local farmers and CSAs, community-supported agriculture, in your conversation. Because if you decided to jump into, okay, we're going to buy a whole bunch of local food, is that going to work for people if you just start asking for it? Perhaps that needs to be planned. Perhaps you need to figure out what the capacity is and what the processes are that could lead local food to show up in your dining halls. There could be other stakeholders. On some campuses, there's a student group called the Real Food Challenge, which is a national student organization. And this is an issue they're working on to get their own campuses to commit to purchasing a certain percentage of their food locally to support local agriculture and put real food, which just came from the farms, into the dining halls for people to eat. And so if there are students on your campus who are interested in this, they could be your allies in pushing the campus to make this kind of decision. So we're doing a little bit of mapping of who might be involved. Let's take a look at my next example. Okay, it's coming up. All right, one more example. Your committee decides that one of the best ways for your campus to affirm the centrality of the public purposes of higher education, which is the fifth commitment, would be to explicitly reward excellence in community-engaged teaching and research through your tenure and promotion policies and procedures. It may be that some of your campuses have done that. It may be that some of your campuses have not done that. I think that's likely to be true for some of you. And so if this was something you chose to aim for, what would the campaign need to look like to accomplish this goal? What would the elements and the stages be in a campaign that you and your colleagues might build to get community engagement, excellence in community engagement into the processes, the procedures, and the policies that guide promotion and tenure decisions on your campus? Again, so thinking of that campaign model, what are the elements? What might you aim to accomplish as the different peaks that would lead you toward that big peak of actually impacting promotion and tenure? Again, is there anybody who's done this? Or is there anybody whose campus has done this? Or is there anybody who's thinking about working toward this as part of your campus civic action plan? So we're coming back to our chat room, and if this is something you would like to comment on, because you think either you have direct experience about it or it's something you're thinking about, share a comment. Who would need to be involved? Who might you start having one-to-one conversations with to motivate them to be part of a campaign to create this change? Okay, star more. We have thought about it at USF, but the barriers are many. Our faculty is unionized, so it would have to be a change in collective bargaining agreement. Okay, yes, that's right, Star. And one of the, as you're doing power mapping to map, who holds the power to make this change happen, who would have the possibility of acting as a gatekeeper to let you through or to keep you from going through, Your faculty union is going to be one of those. Faculty would need, I'm reading Star's post. Some of you are on phones and can't read it because your phone doesn't show it, perhaps. Faculty would need to drive that change and would need to convince union leadership, she says. And administrators would also have to be on board. So you've got 3 different groups you've identified, Star, that we would need to talk with, to find common ground, and to motivate to be part of working on this change. Some faculty who care about community engagement who could drive this change. Some faculty who themselves practice community engaged research or community engaged teaching. And those would be the people who would need to talk with union leadership and convince union leadership that this is a good idea. And also, your administrators would have to be on board. And then this would have to play out in all of the different places that those decisions get made, which, depending on how your campus is structured, might involve departments, and then if you have multiple colleges within a university, at the level of the college and at the level of the overall system with the highest administrators, that probably your provost, making final decisions about promotion and tenure. So let me tell you a story from UMass Amherst of how we've worked on this. We haven't finished the job. We've got part of the way there. And about 10 years ago, a group of us who were part of, or were the Faculty Senate Council on Public Engagement and Outreach. So this started in the Faculty Senate, in a specific council of the Faculty Senate, which was focused on public engagement and outreach. And those of us in that council started talking about how are we going to build really solid commitment to community-engaged scholarship, community-engaged teaching and research. And we said, we have to get it into promotion and tenure, because if we can't get it there, faculty who care about it, especially new faculty who care about it, may put their energy into it and then not get tenure and then be sent away. And so the faculty reward system has to express an institutional commitment to this work. So we said, how do we start? We decided that the first place to start was simply making visible how faculty already were doing community engagement in their research and teaching. So we have, like probably most of your institutions have, a traditional process of faculty writing an annual faculty report that talks about what have we done. And there's a set of questions that faculty have to answer. And in our annual faculty report, or AFR for short, questions are, what have you done in your teaching? So you tell about the courses you've taught, and that can be pre-populated from the registrar's database. What have you done in your research? And you tell about your grants and publications. And what have you done for service? And there are a few additional questions. And at one point where there was a lot of attention being given on the campus to questions of diversity and multiculturalism, which was the language used at that point, the AFR was revised to add a question to each of those 3 sections. Does the work that you've done in your teaching or in your research or in your service contribute to multiculturalism and diversity. So we said, there's a model. Let's see if we can get the AFR to have another question in teaching, research, and service that says, has the work that you've done in your teaching, your research, and your service involved you in community engagement? And we started by going to the president of the union and saying, we want the union to support this change, because there are a lot of faculty who do this work and their work is invisible because the AFR doesn't ask about it. And he agreed. He talked to the rest of the union leadership. We also went to the provost and we said, we'd like to suggest this change to the AFR. He said, well, this will have to be bargained with the union. And we said, we know, and we're talking to the union, and they're considering bargaining that with you. And so they did, in fact, in the next bargaining round, agree to change the AFR and ask that question. And so that came in to the AFR. That was the first step. Then there came the 150th anniversary of the university. And there was a decision to celebrate this in all sorts of ways. And there was some money put up as a pot of money that you could draw on to celebrate the anniversary. So we said, let's ask for some of that money to do a symposium on engaged scholarship, because we're a land-grant university. We have a mission historically from the beginning of our founding to contribute to communities that are around us and across the state and the nation. And so let's celebrate that in a symposium on engaged scholarship. So we got some money because there was an opportunity to get money. We used the money to put together an event where we invited upper administrators and community engaged faculty and deans and department heads to come together to talk about engaged scholarship. And we asked, what could the university do to really support engaged scholarship? And we asked people to talk about that at tables. And the tables came up with a bunch of ideas, but the idea that came up most often was change, promotion, and tenure. So we said, okay, this is a message from a whole bunch of us. How can we do it? So we were holding that question. Then it came time for the university to develop a new strategic plan. Our accreditation agency told our chancellor, it's time for a new strategic plan. So he invited the campus to contribute to the writing of a strategic plan. So our faculty senate council said, we can help with that. We can put in a bunch about community engaged scholarship, teaching and research. And we can put in a statement about the importance of faculty and administrators working to bring this into promotion and tenure. We went back to the union to get their support on this. And the union leadership said, does this mean everybody's going to have to do it? We said, no, not at all, because we wouldn't want everyone to do it. Some people would really mess it up. What we want is for the people who choose to do it to be recognized as doing something that really supports a priority of the campus. And the union leadership said, well, that's great, because we want to support our faculty. And so then they got behind it. And this got written into our strategic plan. So that's the point at which the story pauses. We got a new provost who was not happy about that part of the strategic plan. And we're trying to figure out, well, how do we move this forward to the next step? It's a long haul. But those examples might be useful. Okay. I think at this point, what I'd like to do is a quick interview with one of you who I have prearranged to do an interview with, and then we'll have some time for open questions and discussion. This is scheduled to last for another hour and a half. Is that right? Oh, no, that's not right. We've got about 20 minutes left. So we'll take a few minutes for this interview, and then we'll open it up. And the person that I will be interviewing is Star Moore from University of San Francisco. And can you help me bring Star up?
Yes. So Star, actually, all you'll need to do is go ahead and unmute yourself, and then you can go ahead and start interacting here. So, all right.
Okay, Star, hi, and thanks for being on the other side of this interview.
Sure, happy to do it.
Okay, good. So my first question is, what is your role on your campus?
I'm the Director of Community Engaged Learning, and I'm located in the McCarthy Center for Public Service and the Common Good, and we report to the Provost's office.
Okay, good, thank you. And has your president made a commitment to build a civic action plan?
Yes, he signed on. And then we also, a colleague and I, attended the Civic Action Planning Institute in San Diego.
Mm-hmm.
And subsequently, Campus Compact emailed the president, which sort of reminded him, I think, that we had signed on. And that prompted him to email me and my colleague about, the plan to move forward. So he's involved.
Okay, good. So there is, from the highest level, some degree of commitment to creating this plan, which would then require the university to follow it and carry it out.
Right.
Or at least it would call on the university to do that. Right. So, okay, my next question is, I want to ask about your campaign. So, what have you and your colleague done so far as the foundation for your campaign to build this plan?
Yeah.
What are some of the key things that you've done?
So we have a couple of different things in motion. Actually, the day we got back from the Civic Action Planning Institute, the next day we had a meeting with our steering committee for our center, which is really like a community engagement steering committee for campus.
Mm-hmm.
And so we, informed them about the civic action planning process and actually engaged them in some brainstorming, sort of like a SWOT analysis, but wanted to really capture their perspectives on where we stand with regard to civic engagement and where they would like to see us go. Simultaneously, we are currently reaching out across the institution to find community partners and community leaders who could be part of kind of a town hall in February and have them contribute their thoughts to the process. I think, one of the things I'm proud of with us is that we don't just see community partners as the only constituents, but rather who are other members of community or faith leaders or even, people, members of our local government who should have a voice in this as well. So we're going to try to bring all of those voices in. And then we also hope to have a similar student town hall and engage students from across campus. So the low-hanging fruit are the students who participate in the programs from our public service center, but we really wanted to make sure that we captured other voices across campus, especially activist student voices. So our BSU is very involved with activism on campus, and we have a strong student government. So we want to make sure they're represented as well. And then we're meeting with the leadership. So I think next Monday we have a meeting with our president and provost to talk about, how to move the plan forward.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so you've done a lot already. That sounds good. You used a phrase that I would like to underline, low-hanging fruit. Because as an organizer, one of the early things to think about is, where is the low-hanging fruit that's relatively easy to pick? Because if you can bring people together to pick that fruit, then you have a sense of collective success that you can build on. And so that's really a smart thing to do. You said you started with your steering committee for your center. And let me ask about who's on that steering committee, not necessarily the names of the people, but the identities that are represented there, the institutional identities.
Yeah, so it's mostly faculty members, and it's faculty from across all the colleges, including the School of Law. The people who are doing the community engaged teaching and scholarship are represented, but we also have representation from university ministry, from the intercultural centers, from our Office of Diversity Engagement and Community Outreach. So some of the associate deans also are part of that. And then we have a handful of students, and I will say, sadly, a few community partners, but not many. I think we have 3 who participate. So it's somewhat diverse, but not totally representative of our inclusive vision. So we're working on changing that too.
So as I think about sitting in your chair and trying to be the person who's helping this process move forward at your campus, one way to think about working with that committee is to think of asking them for their input and their ideas and then trying to do something with it. And another way to think about working with that committee would be asking them to also become organizers and to begin doing one-to-ones with other key people who they have access to help build out a vision and a set of commitments to embrace what gets created and to create it. Where do you see yourself between those two kinds of ways of working with the steering committee?
Yeah, that's a great question, because I do think, when you talked about foundation and what is the prior work we've done, I do think we've created a really strong network of faculty and even some departments that are very engaged. And yet we're sort of, I think we never go so far as to really expect them to do the legwork, the representatives on our committee. And I think some of that is because we have before and it hasn't necessarily gone well. And so it feels like our default is to, and this is kind of what we're in the process of doing, is to seek the input and ideas, but also the connections that our steering committee members have, and then we do the outreach, kind of using that person as the entry point. So, so-and-so suggested I talk to you about this because, you're an important stakeholder, but we really don't, and yeah, I mean, perhaps this is a mistake, but we really don't make that direct ask of our committee members to go out and do anything quite like that, where they're actually the advocates and the leaders.
So I recognize the mode of operation you've just described, because I've done a lot of that too. And but as I study organizing and think about how to really use the lens of an organizer, it challenges me to think about how can I elicit commitments from people to hold this in common, to hold this together, and to carry it forward. And this pushes me back to the idea of one-to-one meetings. So again, there may be a number of people in your committee who, if they're sitting in a room together and you say, well, okay, how about let's have you go and do some other meetings with people. They'll do what my students sometimes do, which is look at some place that's not at me when I've asked them to present something. But if you schedule some one-to-one meetings with those key members of your committee, and I'm thinking of the community members and the students as well as the faculty, to talk about what is it they might be able to do to really move this process forward? And looking at those 5 commitments, where's the center of gravity for them? And what's the piece or the pieces? What are the pieces that they feel like they could really work on? And if they've identified some things, then you ask for the commitment. So tell me what you feel you can do. And when could you do it by? And I'll check back in with you to see how it's gone. And so part of your role as an organizer is building that commitment, but also that capacity, because you may need to consult with them about, well, okay, that didn't go so well. So the next step you take, how could you do it perhaps a little differently so that it will go well? And we're incubating the capacity in our colleagues to think in this rather different way. You know, most faculty are not trained as organizers. They're trained as academics, and they know how to think about stuff, and talk about it, but they don't necessarily know about how to bring people together to build this new thing. So, is there a point in this process, Star, that as you're looking from where you are now to where you want to get to, that strikes you as particularly challenging? Because if there is, we could talk about that for a couple of minutes.
Yeah, I think there are a number of sort of concerns, but I think my immediate fear, I will own it, is that when we go to meet with the provost and the president, that they will really just want the civic action plan to reflect what we've already done, or to be kind of generic or safe in a way, to not really push. I mean, one of the sort of agendas that my colleague and I, who's the director of the center, have, and maybe that we shouldn't have our own agenda per se, but is that we really need to look internally at the community of our institution. So we have a requirement for students to do service learning, and so I think that feels very safe to focus on. We're building community between the campus and the community, but then the external community. But then we've had a number of incidents over the past several months on campus that really demonstrate that there's a lot of work that we need to do here in our own community. And so one of the things we hope to capture in the Civic Action Plan is some commitment to that. And I anticipate perhaps some resistance at the administrator level to take that on. So I think that's maybe the big thing.
Okay, that's huge. And what strikes me in thinking about that is, a lot of things. We could have much longer conversation about this than we have time for right now online. But one thing that strikes me is that the second commitment in the 5 commitments has to do with preparing our students for lives of engaged citizenship with the motivation and capacity to deliberate, act, and lead in pursuit of the common good. So the service learning that you require and do addresses this to some degree. But what you just said is clearly it's not doing the whole job. So the question I have is, what would it take to truly prepare all of your students for lives of engaged citizenship with those motivations and capacities? What else needs to happen to make the changes in your students that your president has committed to try to make? And then the other question I would ask is, what might the interest be of the president and the provost to move in this direction? And they have many interests, of course. And one of their interests is to not put too much effort into any one thing so that they've got enough energy left to address all the other things that they have to address. But to the extent that this claims their focus, what interests might be addressed that you know they have, or that you could discover in the conversation with them?
Yeah, I mean, I think, community engagement and social justice are very central to our vision and mission. And so I think they are always interested in finding ways for us to be congruent with that.
Mm-hmm.
We do have the Carnegie Community Engagement Classification, and I think administrators see that as something that's kind of a uniquely conveys our identity, our institutional identity, and sort of sets us apart. So I think we can leverage those things. And I think, like I said, there's been some challenges on campus with our community and inclusivity of our community. And I think they probably feel the need and the pressure for change, but also probably a certain dose of fear about what might need to happen to make that change. But when you talked about the story of now, I think maybe now is a perfect time to propose this action plan, because it's clear that there are problems. So anyway.
Okay, and this could be a response to those problems. Yeah. Okay, Star, we're almost out of time for this entire webinar, so we should probably bring this interview to a close. Thank you so much for stepping up and thinking with me about your case and sharing that with the rest of the people on this call.
Yeah, happy to do it.
Okay, and we can talk more about this if you want.
Yes.
And that's also true for the rest of you. Campus Compact has offered to make me available as a consultant to the campuses that are working on this plan. And so there'll be an email coming out at some point saying, well, here's how you can reach me and set up a time for me to talk either directly with you or for you to convene your committee. And we could do a webinar or a Zoom chat with your committee and me. I'd be happy to do that. So I promised to allow the rest of you to ask questions. We probably have time for one question because it's 1:28 by my clock. So is there someone who would like to share a question and get a quick response to it? You can put it in the chat space if there is. And you're all thinking about it, I know. I know you are, just like my students are thinking about it when the class is very quiet. That's always what's happening. Okay, Drew. Drew says, as we begin a new campaign related to our civic action plans, how do we avoid initiative fatigue? Let me first put that back to the group. Does anyone have an idea in response to that question? How do we avoid initiative fatigue? I'm sure you've never seen that. Your colleagues have never seen that. Yes, amen, Drew, we feel this, says somebody named Star Moore. Yeah, okay. Initiative fatigue. Okay. Kirsten says, connect it to what is already going on. it's another way to do what you're already doing. And it's another way to do what you have made the commitment already to do. That's part of the answer. For me, another part of the answer, I'll give a response to. Another part of the answer is, I think this is why Stars added, why I'm always hesitant to ask people to do more than contribute ideas. I don't want to burn them out by asking for more of a commitment, but my pep talk is making you, Star, think you should give it a try. Okay. For me, it comes back to interests. What are the interests of these other people? Because we're willing to commit energy to the things that we care about. And the more we care about those things, the more energy we're willing to commit to them, usually. And so what are the things that people deeply care about? Where are their deepest interests in the work that they're doing? And where are the points of connection between those interests and you and this initiative? And if you're asking them to move this initiative forward by helping it happen in ways that really connect to their interests, they will be much more willing to do it. If they're being asked to do something, yeah, it's a good idea. Somebody should do it. Somebody should do it. Oh, you want me to do it? Yeah, I guess I should do a little bit of it. That's not going to get very far. But what is it they care about? And it may be surprising to discover the things that some people care about. There is, I've heard from my friends here at the National Campus Compact office that there is a person responsible for food service in Utah who is really excited about this idea of local purchasing. I think I got that right. Who knew? But someone asked and found out. So I guess I'm saying you need to have conversations that are open and not sort of prejudged about, yes, I want to talk to you because I want to make you do this. But I want to find out where are the points of connection and your interests and mine. So we're 3 minutes past the end of this time, and people have been moving out of this space and into their other lives. And Drew says thank you to everyone. And I want to add thank you to everyone because this is really important work, and I appreciate your commitment to make it happen in the spaces that you work in. And I would love to continue this conversation in other ways with each of you. So if that's something you want to do, we'll figure out a way to do it.
And John, this is Maggie Grove at Campus Compact. I just want to thank you so much for doing this for us, for sharing the story of you, beginning the story of us, helping us all to begin to see ourselves in new roles as organizers, and just to think a little bit differently about how we might proceed this time with this particular type of task. I think it's a nice day to kick off a values-oriented effort. So thank you so much, and thanks to all of you. And we are excited to have John continue to work with you and your teams, and we'll be following up with an email on information about how you can access him as a coach.
Okay.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Maggie.
Yep.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.